one of the questions, the homework, if you will, from council one at a time. And we could ask Director Morrison to introduce each one if we feel the need. But I think pretty much we're ready to go. Is that right? Okay. So the first question that we're being asked to consider by the council is the facade consistent with the town's architectural development guidelines for downtown?
Madam Chair, I think some of these questions will be easier to deal with than others. It might be to our advantage to get them out of the right way.
Oh.
First, I think the number 3 would be the easiest to get out of the way, and then I think number 1 and 2 might be the biggest. So if we can get number 3 out of the way first, might be helpful.
How does that one do? All right. Number 3, the use of accommodation for tourism. Any?
This is the 20% short-term rental, and I don't think there's a major. I believe your comments, Director Morrison, was the C1 area is zoned for a full hotel, so it's certainly zoned for 20% accommodations that this one suggests. So I don't see any grounds in the MPS to deny that use.
Jim Morgenstern.
I'm afraid I don't see it exactly that way, or at least there's an issue here that I think we need to discuss as part of the committee, and maybe I need a little bit of help on this. The argument that Director Morrison is making is in large part that the MPS policy should not be used to address issues of unfair competition, which was a concern that was raised by the community that came before us. I support that as a principle. I mean, I think that makes sense. But this is where I have a bit of a difficulty, is that, and I understand that a hotel is a permissible use in the C1 zone, but that's not entirely what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a situation here where the same building is being allocated 2 different land uses. Building never changes, the spaces in the building never changes. On Monday it's a hotel, on Tuesday it's a residential rental unit. That seems odd to me. And I guess I've never run into that situation before in front of this committee, where we have interpreted our policies such that, now this is not an issue where a developer is coming forward and saying, I want to build a hotel. This is an issue where developers coming forward saying, I want to build rental residential units. And in fact, the only manner in which we assessed this development was on the basis of rental residential units. If you go back and look at things like how we dealt with parking, we never dealt with parking associated with the possibility that the rental units would be hotel for parking time. So we only assessed it as a residential unit, but we were being asked to designate a single land use, a single building, to have 2 separate land uses at the discretion, essentially, of the developer. The reason I raise this is that I'm trying to get to the point of whether or not it is, in fact, our interpretation of the policy, that rather, it seems to me, and again I stand to be corrected, but that rather odd interpretation of the policy that we would allow a single land use to, or a single building to have 2 land uses. If that is because we are interpreting the policy that way, and that is where the competitive advantage comes from, then I would disagree with the notion that we should not be discussing it around this table. Because that's the first issue, is whether we even should be discussing about the issue of competitive advantage because it's an MPS policy issue. Well, that really determines whether or not we, by our interpretation of the policy, are providing that competitive advantage, allowing this particular unit to be both, as I say, a rental unit one day and a hotel unit the next day. It seems to me that that's an issue that we need to get our head around. The second issue is whether or not the change from 33% to 20% made a difference. The suggestion here is that it addressed the issue, but frankly on that point I would say that once again as a committee it seems to me that we're making decisions based on no information. We've had this proposal before us since September. I've never seen anything that deals with vacancy rates, with the need for hotel accommodation, with whether or not this development will in fact be, it could be a very positive thing, and the addition of these hotel rooms could in fact be an extraordinarily positive thing. for the community. It could also be a very negative thing, and that goes back then to the issue of whether or not there's a competitive advantage. But the issue I wanted to raise, because otherwise we have nothing to discuss, is whether or not the committee thinks that in fact we are, because of the manner in which we are dealing with this policy, or allowing, creating the situation where there is in fact a competitive advantage. I hope that was clear. If not, I'd be happy to try it. It's not entirely clear in my mind, but that's the issue that I have been struggling with. It seems to me that we, by the way in which we are in an entirely, I'll say unprecedented, and I'll stand to be corrected if that's not the case, but in a rather unprecedented way, allowing one building to have 2 land uses, that we are the ones that in fact by policy are creating the competitive disadvantage, and consequently it is something that we should discuss. If I'm wrong about that, then we should discuss it, and we can proceed as Councillor Sparkman suggested.